Well, a very good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. It is such a pleasure to welcome you. For any listeners who may be new to this series, or to any who may come across this session later on YouTube, allow me very briefly to make an introduction to say what those sessions are about and how they were brought about. It's almost a year ago when the Charles University Orchestra and Chorus, of whom I am the chief conductor, were in the unhappy position of realizing that it was no longer safe to meet together for our rehearsals, for our weekend retreats, and for our concerts. Something that was rather painful because we had a particularly delightful program scheduled ahead of us. But of course, people's health must come first, the health of our own members, the health of our friends and families, the health of our audiences. And so we decided that we would stop rehearsing even before there were government directives to that effect, which also appeared in due course. But after a while, it occurred to me that it would be rather wonderful if, in lieu of making music together, something that for understandable reasons we could no longer do, we could remain in touch with each other, with the music that we love and which we would like to perform or which we had recently performed, with our own instruments and voices and with our own musicalities, as well as for the sake of fellowship and friendship in these times of isolation, that we would try to turn this rather cruel disadvantage of not being able to meet physically and make music together into a creative advantage, in that we would be able to talk about music, to talk about the circumstances and the context, not necessarily in an abstract way, but even looking at particular scores together, discussing what went behind their composition, what else a composer was doing or writing, what he said in letters that he wrote to different people, what his colleagues and friends were doing, how these things interacted with each other, and explore the history, the subsequent history of the works in question, what editions emerged, how we can choose between them, what present-day musicology has to say about them, and also to say something about interpretative traditions, most obviously assessed through some favorite recordings of mine that I should like to present to the orchestra and to the chorus. At the time, I had familiarized myself with Zoom and with Teams and with other platforms, and we had those sessions. A small number, a relatively small number, I think perhaps less than half our members chose to attend those sessions. A number of others understandably felt that as they were working at a computer all day, they would very much look forward to joining the orchestra and the chorus when it became possible, but they were not in a position to spend many more hours behind their computer screens, which also is understandable. But there was a core of people who were very appreciative of this initiative. And when it turned out in September and October that, again, we would not be in a position to make music together, I decided to continue these sessions. And this time I decided that I would no longer confine myself to music that we had recently performed or were planning to perform, but rather to embrace repertoire that happens to be interesting and exciting to me. Things that I've performed many years in the past, things that I have never performed but would love to do so. And also, we decided to extend also our audience by inviting friends from different organizations or personal friends who are music lovers to attend those sessions. And likewise, I had the idea to make those sessions more exciting also for our own members, to invite distinguished friends who could liven up those sessions with their very interesting perspectives and diverse experiences. And it is in that spirit that I most recently took the liberty of asking my very dear friend, Dr. Giuseppe Sanfratello, currently of the University of Catania in Sicily, to be our honored guest on this occasion. And I'm delighted that, though he's extremely busy, he graciously acceded to my request. So, Giuseppe, a very warm welcome to you. It is such a great pleasure that you're able to join us this evening. And a very warm welcome to our audience.
Thank you very much.
I see members of our orchestra and of our chorus, but also distinguished guests and friends, not least Professor Trulsgaard, Professor Girolamo Garofalo, and others. So, by way of a little introduction about our guest, I shall now share my screen, if I may. You must forgive the very, very overcrowded appearance of my desktop, embarrassingly so, I should say. So do please forgive me for that. I shall now endeavor to open my presentation. And here it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Giuseppe Sanfratello. I had the very great pleasure of first being introduced to him by Professor Christian Trulsgaard in Copenhagen. At the time, I believe that Giuseppe had graciously attended my first lecture for the Danish National Committee for Byzantine Studies. At the time, he had not yet started his doctoral studies at the Saxo Institute of the University of Copenhagen under Christian Trulsgaard. It is on that occasion that we met, and then we had I had the pleasure of having further contact with him after he started his doctoral research. And indeed, it was a very great honor for me to attend his inaugural lecture, his maiden lecture, which was on oral and written musical traditions, methodologies, composition, cases. And it was an exceedingly interesting and enjoyable experience for me. I remember writing about it enthusiastically on my own Facebook pages on that occasion, the 12th of September 2015, I see. And I made extensive notes. And it seemed to me that this was really ethnomusicology, or if you prefer, historical ethnomusicology at its very best. You know, ethnomusicology is something that is sometimes not presented in the best possible way, and perhaps for that reason it has been looked down upon by mainstream musicologists. But what was being presented to us at those lectures was ethnomusicology at its best, which is not something that has nothing to do with the music or with musicology, but it embraces the music and it overlaps with musicology. In fact, it is an area of particularly fruitful overlaps at its best. And I remember the definition that Giuseppe gave, amongst many others: people making music, in 3 words. That's what it is. So it was a great pleasure for me to do so. And this is a photograph that was taken with Giuseppe playing on his delightful instrument, with Professor Maria Alexandru playing on her delightful instrument, after a particularly enjoyable, marvelous dinner held in Christian's home with Professor Bergzagel present and various other distinguished guests. An occasion that I treasure very much. I think it was the 19th of January 2016. Marvelous food, very great company, great conversation, great music. And After that, I was in Prague and did not have occasion to visit Copenhagen, much to my regret, but a marvelous piece of work that had been done by Giuseppe and Christian and Gigi came to Prague, as it were, and landed on my lap, which is this very fine tome of beautifully edited and presented transcriptions of sacred music from the rite of the Italian Albanian communities in Sicily. I remember the enthusiasm with which I was able to hold this volume in my hands and sing from it. And it is a satisfaction that has not dimmed with time, and one finds all sorts of delightful musical surprises as one peruses those volumes, the pages of this volume. The next event which I was delighted to be involved with, and indeed I may perhaps allow myself to take credit for it, amongst many others, of course. It was primarily Dr. Jiří Kroupa, who was one of the key organizers of Medren, the medieval and Renaissance music conference that took place in Prague at St. Agnes's convent in central Prague. And as I know Dr. Kroupa, I serve on the editorial board of a peer-reviewed journal of which he is the chief editor, Clavibus Unitis. And he approached me and asked me if I could chair and organize one or two sessions devoted to the Eastern and Oriental sacred musical traditions. So, amongst other people whom I was delighted to contact, of course not all of whom were able to come to Prague at the time, to my very great delight, Giuseppe was one of those who took up my invitation. And it was a pleasure also to host him personally, offering him hospitality in my flat on that occasion. This is another photograph from the same occasion. And one of those sessions was chaired by my very dear friend, the late lamented Professor Evgen Kindler. I had the honor of chairing the session when he lectured, and he kindly chaired the session when I lectured. And I was chairing the session where Giuseppe appeared with an interesting paper here, which he may yet be able to tell us a little more about. And in addition, we had pleasant social gatherings around the dinner table. You can see this. I was informed discreetly that that evening happened to be Giuseppe's birthday, so with great urgency I procured a cake. I fear a rather small and modest cake. It was difficult to create equal pieces enough for everybody, but we managed to do it. So this is a very pleasant recollection at a more personal level of the event, but it was a very fine conference, and a volume of proceedings from it that I have been editing with Dr. Kroupa will, God willing, appear in the not too distant future, by the way. So it might be good to keep our eyes open for that. More recently, I gather that Giuseppe has been very, very active musically and musicologically and ethnomusicologically, and Facebook, or if you like, a little bird came and told me, although Giuseppe was too modest to say so, but he won a song contest, of which he might perhaps tell us a little more himself. And any of you who know Giuseppe will know that he's very, very fluent in a number of languages, Greek being one of them. And he has been translating a bit of Cavafis of late into Italian. You can see a specimen here. And this is the university where he is now based. It's the University of Catania in Sicily, with some very fine scholars there. And by the look of it, very beautiful architecture also. And in recent weeks, Giuseppe has been exceedingly generously helping me translate some extremely important letters by the Venetian 19th century musician Pietro Bianchini, letters that he wrote in 1855, 1856, and 1857 to the Armenian Mkhitarist father Raphael Trians in Paris. Now, Bianchini is very important because he transcribed a lot of intricate melodies from San Lazzaro in Venice, where there is an Armenian monastery that has been there since 1701. I beg your pardon, the congregation was founded in Constantinople in 1701, but the monastery in Venice was founded on San Lazzaro was founded in 1715 or 16, if I'm not mistaken. And these letters indicate Bianchini's ideals and hopes and his theological and artistic motivation in transcribing Armenian, often very melismatic chants into Western staff notation and harmonizing them. And as he put it, regulating them. In other words, making them conform to the rules of Western staff notation. And we hear in those letters about some of the challenges that he faced, the encouragement that he was offered by some of the monks, as well as the opposition of some of the other more conservative monks. Anyway, Giuseppe has been very graciously helping me with this, and we are hoping that we may be able to have this material in a presentable form published somewhere where it deserves to be. But his most recent research is what I hope we shall hear about on this occasion, as well as things that he did in Copenhagen and previously. He has indicated to me very kindly that three main areas on which he will expound are Cretan vocal music, Sicilian Albanian liturgical singing, and the Greek Ionian islands and their traditional polyphony. So much about my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Giuseppe Sanfratello. Giuseppe, it is a very great pleasure to welcome you. I shall now stop my screen and invite you, as it were, to take over, and we are eager to hear and see what you will present to us. And then when that has concluded, I shall be inviting anyone present to direct such questions as they may have to you.
Thank you very much, Haig. Can you see my screen?
Yes, indeed.
So, thank you very much for your kind invitation. It's a great pleasure and honor indeed to be here, although electronically talking with people tonight that I have known, I've met in this recent years, and unfortunately we can't meet in presence, as it is said, according to the COVID language, the COVID vocabulary that everyone has learned in this very strange and challenging year. I'd like to express especially my congratulations to my dear friend and colleague, Dr. and Maestro Haig Utidjian, for organizing such a splendid series of opportunity to meet, to stay close, to listen to and discuss about music in such difficult and challenging times for everyone. As Haig very kindly introduced, I will try to give a very short and not that much academic account about my recent, and when I say recent, I'm talking about 10 years almost, starting from the Cretan experience that started during an Erasmus program visiting period on Crete in Rethymno. in February 2010. So it's 11 years ago, and 2010. So I will say something about research on vocal music in Crete, something about the Sicilian Albanian chant tradition. That was the subject of my PhD dissertation in Copenhagen, and some very preliminary remarks on the Ionian Islands Ionian chant tradition. I will play some video examples, video and audio examples, so you can get, let's say, a taste of these different musical traditions. This tonight linked by the vocality, the use of voices to sing to God, or to sing for the celebration of friendship, especially in the case of Cretan vocal music. And one of the two examples we will listen from the Ionian chant tradition. So, first of all, I would like to start talking about this, this repertoire, the Resitico. The book that you can see on the picture and that you can see also here, it's a volume published in 2017, in which you can find several contributions on Cretan music. So not exclusively on vocal music, but also on the use of Cretan lyra that you can see here. I have a Cretan lyra. I am not a performer, so I can just probably you can see it very well. So I can just play some
Giuseppe,
notes.
we cannot see it at the moment. Could you for a moment unshare your?
Yeah. Yes, you're right. Okay, maybe you know I have to stop the sharing. Okay, you can see. Yes. It's 3 strings instrument A, B, G. Well, it's a bit slow. Okay, I'm not a performer. I'm not a professional performer, so I will. I can play just a very simple tune. I can probably do this. Okay. This is Pota Trakanik Sasteria. It's a very famous traditional tune from Crete. I'm sorry if I'm a bit rusty. I haven't been playing this instrument for so many years. I would like to have time for academic friends here connected. They know very much how sometimes it's very difficult to find time to do things apart from writing and giving lectures. And I mean, this is a very splendid job. I'm not complaining, of course, but sometimes from time to time, it's difficult to find the time to play. So this was just a very short taste on the Cretan lyra sound. I will go back to the presentation now, that is here. Okay. So I was saying that in this book you can find so many different expressions, let's say, of the Cretan music. I dealt specifically with a vocal repertoire that is called the Resitico Tragudi. Resitico comes from Rizes, from the foothill of the mountain, because it's an adjective of something which regards the roots, let's say, the roots of the mountains, because this kind of songs, this kind of repertoire born in this area, it's found in this area around the foothill of the Lefkaori, of this mountainous part of villages in Crete, especially in Western Crete. So I went to Chania, that is a village in the mountain, on the mountains of the western part of Crete, and I met some very nice and friendly rizites, singers of this repertoire. And I had the pleasure and the opportunity of recording some of this, some chants, some songs from this repertoire. This was part of a work that then was written and was presented for my master degree. And Professor Girolamo Garofalo, I'm sure he will remember that period, because I was basically sent to Crete thanks to him. And I mean, he was very kind and very helpful. He suggested me to look at Cretan music, since there was this possibility to go from Sicily, from the University of Palermo, where I have studied for my bachelor and my master degrees. So I had the possibility to go for an Erasmus term program in Crete, and I then collected several musical traditions, and among the field recordings, then at the end I decided to write a thesis about Resitico and Mandinades. So this is a text, Cosme Crisee, Cosme Arghire. That's a very emblematic song of this repertoire. You can see here the text, and then you will see actually a video I have uploaded on YouTube. And it's a very tragic, symbolic, tragic conception of life in Crete and in Greece and in Cretan culture and identity, collective identity. So the text, the very interesting thing about Resitico is that is the elaboration and the fragmentation of the text. You will listen, although probably you are not fluent in modern Greek or you don't know the language, you will listen to this fragmentation, to this elaboration, to this organization of the text. So you will listen Cosme Crisee, Cosme Arghire, Cosme Malamatenie will be cut in so many segments, and these 4 lines, 4 verses, strophe will be cut in 3 micro strophes, let's say. But I would like to give voice to the music instead. So I will immediately share the screen. Can you see the
yes.
The YouTube? Okay, this is a recording. I was there. Basically, you can see me on the very right part of the screen at some point with my very unprofessional video camera and a very good audio recorder that was provided to me from the Department of Music Studies in Palermo. And I recorded what I could record, but at the end I found in the same place, in the same taverna where this man sit down at the table, eating and drinking, and then at the end singing. In the same place, I found a local TV company. They were recording for a program to be broadcasted on a TV, so on a local TV. So I was lucky to find them there, and then eventually I asked them, please, can you provide me with your very professional videos? So basically at the end I used these videos instead of mine. So enjoy. you will listen to the Cosme Crise, Cosme Arghire, and at the end of the Risitico, of this traditional song, they will add a couple of improvised couplet, improvised poetry that in Crete is called mandinades. And then you will listen to the choir entering. Here I am. And the soloist again. Then the choir again. I will stop the sharing here because I think you you got what I wanted to show. Basically, we have we were here, Made tha seker des obseftikosme. So we still have, we should wait for another verse now, but I would like to go ahead because we have some more music to listen to. I just wanted to stress something, that a soloist usually sings a verse or a fragment that exactly at the end, right at the end, not exactly at the very end of the last syllables of the singing of the soloist, then we have the entrance of the choir, like having a sort of multi-layer almost performance in that moment, because on the cadence of the soloist, the choir, right on that very point, the choir responds antiphonally, actually, to what it was already sung by the soloist. So this is a feature, together with the organization, the elaboration of the text, of the lyrics. This is a very important feature of the recitical performance. So this is the first of the three musical examples, musical traditions I wanted to speak about. Of course, we could go in depth. We could say so many other things, but tonight I just want to show very some bits, let's say, some very to provide a very short taste about these musical traditions. So let's go to Copenhagen, to Denmark. I think you know this city, even though you might still have to visit it. I have had the pleasure to live almost 4 years in Copenhagen, being a Sicilian, being from Palermo, so having lived under the sun with a sunny weather. I moved to a not very sunny country. I think that my Professor Troskard will not be, I think he would agree about this, but I loved very much to have this experience in my life. So this is the Nyhavn, is the canal and very important and central district in Copenhagen, close to the one of the main metro station, that is the square Kongens Nytorv. I hope that my Danish is still a bit precise. Christian, you say so. Kongens Nytorv. And yes, this is very, very nice picture, but I would like to say something about what I did in Copenhagen. I learned how to transcribe, so to speak. I learned something about the late medieval musical pneumatic notation. And I had the pleasure to study with Professor Troskard, who taught me, who accompanied me, let's say, during this period of education for me. I learned so many things. And why I went to Copenhagen. I wanted to study from also a philological and comparative analytical point of view, the Sicilian Albanian chant tradition, that is a repertoire that I analyzed in my PhD dissertation. I will talk about it in a while. I just wanted to show you these pictures. On the very right, I am sitting at the scanner in the microfilms room, looking at a manuscript. And on the in the central, on the top picture, you can see in the middle of in the center of the slide, at the top, you can see my very first, one of the first exercises of transcribing. At the very beginning, I was not very good, and Professor Troskard corrected my exercises of transcription so many times until I could learn a bit how to transcribe. And on the very left, you can see a specimen, a very nice example. It's a scan, it's a photograph from a manuscript kept at the National Library of Greece. And this was actually the very oldest dated copy of manuscripts among the selection of manuscripts I studied in Copenhagen to start a comparative, to start an analytical study on a specific chant tradition that is called the Kegragarion. It is about the chanting of psalm verses for Vespers on Saturdays, and in the repertoire, on the hymnographic repertoire of the Orthodox Ecclesiastical Chant. And at the center, I put two nice group of signs with the neumes, because when I got sad about the weather, sometimes I had the impression that even neumes smiled at me, like, don't worry, go ahead. So this was just a joke. Anyway, I would like to talk about, not to talk about my PhD dissertation because it would take some time, but I just want to say that this was a work carried out in 3 years, studying the liturgical chant tradition of the Albrecht communities in Sicily. On the basis of oral and written sources, this chant tradition was already studied by Professor Girolamo Garofalo, who is here with us tonight. He is an ethnomusicologist. He was also one of my teachers in Palermo. So he studied and he still studies this chant tradition from an ethnomusicological point of view. He has recorded so many chants, so many, and also video recorded so many items and ceremonies and celebrations in which this repertoire is sung, is still chanted today. And as Haig kindly already introduced, we had the opportunity together with Professor Troskart to complete this project on the transcriptions by Bartolomeo di Salvo. I have my own copy here. That was basically, it took some time, so many years since Father Bartolomeo di Salvo wanted to publish this collection of musical transcriptions from this, about this musical tradition. He wanted to publish this collection in Copenhagen in the famous Monumenta Musicae Byzantine series of publication series of this kind of studies about Byzantine music, Byzantine chant in so many aspects. And finally, in July 2016, the book was published. And talking about the Piana degli Albanesi, the chant tradition, we have to bear in mind that it's a chant tradition still cultivated, still chanted by people, lay people and faithful in these communities. Where are the Albrecht people, the Albanian speaking communities in Italy? Where they are so in so many places in southern Italy, especially in Calabria, and in Sicily we have 5 villages in which in 4 of them the Byzantine rite is still practiced, while in one of those, in Santa Cristina Gela, the Roman Rite is today practiced. And to provide you a very short impression about this repertoire that was cultivated, orally cultivated for so many centuries, because the Albanian went to Sicily towards the end of the 15th century. A group of Albanian refugees established in 1488, one of the first villages in these colonies, in this province, in the province of Palermo. So I chose to conduct this research to say something more about what's the place of this tradition in the Byzantine chant landscape. So that was the reason why I needed to study chant traditions from late medieval times, from post-Byzantine and from modern Greek Orthodox chant traditions, to create a sort of a diagram, to have a look at chants, multiple versions of chants, and differences and common points between these sister traditions. So I will now play a short video with some excerpts from fieldwork recordings, interviews with priests and lay people of Piana. So I will not say something more about this tradition. You will listen directly from people living the tradition. And this was a video played during my PhD defense, so I didn't spend much time in preparing it. I'm just using the same very video. And I will say something more about some details of this, of what was recorded in these interviews after the video, and then we will move on. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Ci tengo tantissimo alla nostra tradizione. Oggigiorno siamo quando ci siamo tutta una decina, come frequenza almeno domenicale siamo 5-6 persone, la maggior parte donne e poi 2-3 uomini. Ci manca il coraggio, le cose le sappiamo, però giustamente, allora quando dobbiamo iniziare noi cominciamo.
E quindi voi avete imparato, cioè lui come vi ha insegnato a cantare? Il supporto che usate è il testo, la musica, avete imparato a orecchio? Come...
Diciamo più a orecchio, perché giustamente non è che siamo conoscitori di musica, però per la mia esperienza, quando abbiamo in mano un testo con sempre in greco traslitterato, perché giustamente con le note sappiamo, non che sappiamo però sappiamo quando dobbiamo alzare, quando dobbiamo rimanere sulla stessa nota, quando dobbiamo scendere. Dico, queste cose abbiamo imparato.
Lei ha cantato nel coro o in assemblea?
Ho cantato in coro, ho cantato in assemblea.
Ci vuole cantare qualcosa? C'è il Papaiani che può cantare quello con lei, possiamo fare un duetto. Se la sente.
Ci canto un duetto.
Che devi cantare? Quello che ti passa per la testa.
Quello che le piace.
Io so veloce.
Io so.
Canta sto io so veloce.
Io so Theos, io si schiros, io sathanatos, eleisonima.
Come la percepisci? Come la senti questa...
C'è una cosa mia, proprio una cosa che ho, diciamo così, nel nostro DNA.
Sì. Da sempre ho cantato i canti nostri, li ho imparati a memoria perché così si andava avanti, si è sempre andato con la memoria. È la memoria che ci ha salvati, non il pentagramma. Se tu confronti i canti, insomma, registrati da TB, e i nostri sono termini, non è cambiato niente, la memoria è buona, finora, poi si sa.
Io lo sapevo tutto, la messa, così, però così a memoria, non neanche sapevo leggere l'albanese, il greco. Io sempre desideravo di cantare, davvero, desideravo di cantare, però ero timida e non mi...
Però poi hai imparato i canti.
Sì, ora non ci vedo. E io sempre ero preoccupata come la devo servire il Signore. Il parroco mi diceva dobbiamo fare la novena. E come lo faccio? Ma io non vedo come devo, se non leggo non ho messo questa signorina davanti. Prima di cominciare lei mi suggerisce
le parole.
La parola e io già, è così.
Digli come le imparavi questi canti. Come li hai imparati?
Come li ho imparati? Che andavo di qua e di là. Ma quello certe volte non li sapeva, andavo donata. Chi c'era? Allora andavo con il registratore, imparatemi qua. Registrando,
sì.
Io li imparavo.
Tu dovresti ascoltare questi canti e veramente rimani entusiasta, rapito.
E io quando canto queste cose, non so, sento una gioia dentro di me.
1488, che è la data di fondazione di Praga. Siccome da allora è intoccabile la liturgia, quindi di sicuro che non è stato toccato dal 1488 in poi.
So many things to say. I will say something very shortly. The video opens with the incipit of the Paschal Troparion Christos Anesti, Christ is risen, as chanted on Easter Sunday morning by the choir of the cathedral in San Demetrio in Piana degli Albanesi. And then you watched some excerpts from interviews. One of the important thing I think it's the feeling that these people have about their own tradition when they talk about this thing, questa cosa. This thing is something that belongs to them. And the importance of the oral memory also. There was the Roman Rite, Papas Marco Sirchia, who said that è la memoria che ci ha salvati. So it's the memory that has indeed saved us. Of course, we could open a discussion about the persistence of this and the administration of this chant tradition in the 20th century, when we have musical transcriptions in staff notation, we have audio recordings made by ethnomusicologists in fieldwork. One of the first was indeed Ottavio TB in 1950s. But the important thing is, in this case, looking at these interviews, is the feeling that these people have about their own tradition. It's also sometimes, from a certain point of view, could be seen as a sort of nostalgic statement when they say nothing has changed, everything is like when we arrived, our ancestors, of course, arrived. Well, of course, that's not true. I mean, and the word intoccabile, unchanged, untouched, it's not. It cannot be applied to oral traditions. We know that very well. So what I tried to do in my PhD dissertation was trying to understand what happened over the centuries. With the musical sources that we had, I had the pleasure and the possibility to look at some local musical transcriptions. Some of this material was provided, kindly provided by Professor Girolamo Garofalo, and of course the collection of Bartolomeo di Salvo is one of the main source, since he himself collected local sources like Falsone, like the one you can see in the center of this video, and he looked at this already transcribed sources to see whether there were melodic variants, variants to be taken into the collection, to have a look at all the possible variants of melodic profiles. And still, yes, this is a slide, probably I had to put this during my, at the beginning of this Copenhagen part, but it's okay. So this is still work done at the scanner. And now we are going to Zakintos. First of all, I would like to say that the research, this is the third and last part of my presentation tonight. The research on the polyphonic, or rather multi-part singing musical tradition in the Ionian Islands, taking into consideration the three main islands, Corfu, Zakintos, and Kefalonia, in this moment is being based on a literature review process. I had the pleasure to visit Corfu during my first PhD in Copenhagen, because I wanted to look at the what happened in a similar case, looking at a chant tradition, ecclesiastical chant tradition transmitted orally and administered orally, especially in the use of polyphony, of improvised polyphony. A bit something that happened also in Sicily, not too much about the polyphonic, although there are some biphonic examples, but we don't have time, unfortunately, to talk about it. But the oral administration of these traditions was a red thread, something that put in common these two sister traditions. So I went to Corfu and Zakintos, and I had the pleasure to gather something. But still, talking about the current PhD I'm doing now in Catania, the University of Catania, I still need to go on fieldwork, because due to COVID pandemic, as you know, it's difficult to travel, and Greece is in lockdown at the moment. I was planning to go this April to stay 6 to 8 months, but unfortunately I cannot yet. So I'm still stuck. I'm still here at home, trying to write at least the literature review. But I have this tonight the possibility of showing two musical examples. One coming from the popular tradition, the tradition, not sacred musical tradition, that is the one of Arekies, that is a repertoire very much found in Zakintos. As you can see, you have couplets. So in this case, we have couplet, 4 distichs, 4 couplet verse. And the important thing of this repertoire is that it's we have 3 to 4 voices. There is always a soloist starting the incipit, the first words of each strophe, and then the choir. I mean, the other 2 or 3 people accompany as in a chordal form. So, like creating a chord, a vocal chord, accompanying the soloist part until the end of the performance. So you have here this love song. According to my informant, it's a traditional chant from the 19th century, and you have this strophic structure in 4 pieces. And now we are going. You have the. I hope you had the opportunity to read the translation on the right. And then now we are going to listen to the musical example. We are in a taverna in Zakintos. They are deciding who has to sing which part. Fa diesis. The soloist is on the right.
Yes, I have no sound and no vision as yet, Giuseppe.
Okay.
I see your slide with the text.
Okay, let's try again. Okay, probably I have to, sorry, yes. You're right. I have to choose the, yeah, just a moment. Right. Now I think you see the
yes.
the video.
Yes.
Okay. I was sharing the wrong page, let's say, the wrong screen.
Στο πρόσωπο σου το ένα στο πρόσωπο σου το ένα στο πρόσωπο σου πάνω στα μου θάμπωσες το φως μου μικρό κενό στιμό μου με θάμπωσες το φως μου και δεν μπορώ να ειδώ. Φύλα με εσύ στα χείλη, φύλα με εσύ στα χείλη, φύλα με εσύ στα χείλη και εγώ σώμα ουλώ.
Right. So the social function of the areches, like in the Rizitico, in the case of the Rizitico, is found in the social occasion in which people stay together and sing together. It's like a ritual function of people staying together, although we are outside the liturgical and the ecclesiastical context, of course. The last example I want to show you, I have first the last slide to show. Okay, I think you can see the very last slide. Okay, in this case, I will show a very short example from the Troparion of Cassianese, that is a hymn of the Holy Week. In this very case, the musical setting is by Nikolaos Manjaros, that he is very famous for classical musical studies, Greek classical musical studies. He is sort of father of the modern classical musical studies, especially in the opera, and not exclusively, but in the European musical studies in Greece. And he wrote a musical setting, polyphonic setting for this hymn. And this is something I should just underline. Usually Greek Orthodox chant is monophonic, is monodic. The special feature of this Ionian islands is that the traditional, not exclusively the scholar, like the classical, like in the case of Manjaros example, not only the scholar and the classical tradition, but also the oral tradition, the chant tradition in ecclesiastical context is polyphonic. And this tradition is very strong in Kefalonia and Zakintos. In Corfu, unfortunately, we can see that the polyphonic chant tradition in the ecclesiastical context is unfortunately almost disappearing. So on the left, you can see the inscription on the where Nikolaos Manjaros born in Corfu. And this is on the right is the translation of the text. I didn't take an official translation, so I'm sorry, Christian. I found this at the very lately before starting this short discussion. I found this translation of the Pima Cassianis of the Troparion of Cassia. So it's I would like just to say that it's the hymn of the penitent woman, and it's sung on Wednesday, Holy Wednesday, that traditionally is sung at the Matins of Holy Wednesday. So on Holy Tuesday night, Holy Tuesday evening, that is the Matins of Holy Wednesday, usually in Greek Orthodox Church. So now we are going to listen to this setting, musical setting, performed by a choir in the parish of Saint Iasonos and Sosipatros. And the performance in this case is the one by the choir conducted by my friend and co-tutor, external supervisor of the current thesis I'm doing now on the about the Ionian chant tradition, both secular and ecclesiastical. And this is a recording I made in 2016 when I was in Corfu. It's 8 minutes. I will play probably 2-3 minutes just to give a hint, just to provide the idea, the general idea of this setting. I just want to say before listening to this example, this is it's a classical musical setting. It's not like the oral improvisation, the oral polyphonic improvisation that we could hear in the Arekies from Zakintos, or also in the ecclesiastical chant. In some cases in Corfu and Zakintos and Kefalonia, that we can hear this improvisation, this Αυτοσχέδια polyphonia, they call it, it's a improvised polyphony. This case is a very different case because Manjaros was a composer. So we have musical sheets in this case. We can read this music. Okay, so it's a particular example. And the choir is Ionios Harmonia, conducted by Stathis Makris. Stathis Makris is the co-supervisor of my thesis at the moment. And I recorded it on the Great and Holy Wednesday, said again, Tuesday, or Holy Tuesday afternoon. Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay. So this was what I wanted to share with you. I'm sorry if I missed so many details because, you know, talking about musical traditions that are not heard and listened to every day in our cities, probably in where we live, could be difficult to trying to convey all the ideas and the features of a tradition. So I'm sorry, and if I missed something very important, but this is an open discussion. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Haig, for the time that you gave me to say these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Giuseppe, for this really wonderful, very rich presentation, which for most of us would have been an eye-opener, because very few people know any of those three distinct traditions that you presented to us so very well. And all three of them, each in its own way, have something very genuine and something very powerful about them. The word I want isn't primitive, but something primordial, something fundamental, something that it is so apparent that penetrates right to the depth of the soul of each person who seems to be taking part in this music making of beauty. In some cases, maybe an acquired taste for some people, but certainly, speaking for myself, traditions that are musically very attractive and quite different from what will sound more familiar to most people. Before I, as it were, open the floor to questions, I have 2 or 3 things to ask you myself, if I may. Indeed, as Professor Christian Troelsgaard is saying, this is a real treat, particularly as this was a musical Mediterranean trip. In parts of the world that certainly those of us in the northern hemisphere, where there's not so much sunlight and so on, appreciate all the more, and indeed amidst the travel ban from which we are all suffering, although we understand the reasons for it and we respect it, of course. So various things came to mind to me when you did these things. One is, hopefully, although you mentioned that in certain instances the tradition in Corfu, for example, was disappearing, but in many places it's still alive and kicking, and it was very reassuring and pleasing to see in several of the scenes that you indicated to us in photographs or videos that a certain continuity in the tradition seems assured, in that amongst those rather old ladies or the elderly gentlemen who were singing, there were their sons and perhaps their grandsons there. So one hopes that these precious traditions, especially in instances where it is entirely oral and it relies on memory, that the future of the tradition is assured. Now, some of the documentation that you've been producing, making sound recordings, making videos, taking photographs, transcriptions that are being published, I suppose they help to guard against the loss of those traditions, but you still need people to go on singing in the same sort of context in which they do so naturally, whether it is inside a church, whether it is around the table with half drunk bottles of wine, glasses of wine. To what extent is this tradition threatened, really, in our present time, when people find it easier to stay at home and watch Netflix rather than go out and do things with other people, even when this is allowed? Is the younger generation, for example, of the Albanian Sicilian tradition, is it as engaged in singing those melodies as their predecessors have been?
Okay, it's a very complex question, not because the question is not good, it's very good. So thank you very much, Haig. I think that it's difficult to find good examples of people trying to keep the tradition in this very moment, in this period, because if you have to perform, if you want to perform such kind of traditions, you have to meet. You have to be in the same places. There are some examples of people singing from home, and then, of course, if they have to sing together and simultaneously, you have to record separated parts, musical parts, and you have to mix and to put together. I had the pleasure to attend one of the 100th webinar this year. There was one about ethnomusicology, Sardinian ethnomusicology, and the eminent Sicilian, but working in Sardinia, ethnomusicologist Ignazio Macchiarella showed us a choir of lamentatori, people singing lamentations for Holy Friday from home. Because there was this polyvocal, this multi-part singing. So in Sicily, it was in Sicily. I can try to find the link, and if we have time, we can have a look at it, because I used it during my seminar on ethnomusicology. I'm teaching now at the University of Catania. So basically, in that occasion, we can see people sitting at home and recording their own voices, responding to the first voice of the soloist. But the problem is that this musical performance is not natural at all if you consider that they are not singing really together. They are singing separately, and then one free guy, because you have to have free time to do such kind of things, sitting at the computer, working on video editing, putting all these very nice faces singing just on one screen, synchronizing the voices with all the opening, and the ending of the musical phrases, and then at the end you have the choir. But of course, it's a virtual choir. It's still something that people do to make music in order to safeguard not just music as such, but the practice of music, because people are missing staying together and doing everything together, even musical performances. So I will try now to find this link while you want maybe
as
to
you
add
look
something
for the
else,
link,
but
I just wanted to say what I had in mind wasn't so much the present situation with the pandemic, which I hope is something exceptional, but the general tendency in decades for people in general to participate less in civic activities, in activities that involve being their home and singing together, whether it is a Welsh male voice choir, whether it is a choral society, whether it is a university choir or whatever, and do things individually, which of course is something that threatens traditions. And when it is small and dispersed communities, such as those of the Christian Albanians in various places in Italy, is there not a danger that the young generation, they will prefer to stay at home, play computer games or watch Netflix or do other things, but not continue these traditions of long standing?
Well, this is a risk. Of course, it depends on the organization at local diocese. If we are talking about ecclesiastical chant, something that could be made, but Gigi can tell some more about this, because it's a dream to think about a school of Byzantine music, for example, in Piana degli Albanesi. It's something that Gigi for years have been thinking about, and also Papa Yanni Pecoraro, that is one of the priests you watched in the video. There is this nice idea, but as far as I know, it's still a nice idea. Because to establish an ecclesiastical school of music, like in other places around the world, not just in the Christian or in the Catholic rite, in Greece, for example, you find the ecclesiastical at a diocese level a school of Byzantine music, because it's a tradition that needs to be studied, to be transmitted in some way. So I'm not saying that tradition can be safeguarded, let's say, only if people are guided by an institution. But in some cases, like in ecclesiastical chant, it could be a huge help if churches, if parishes, dioceses can organize local school of music in order to transmit and to keep alive the tradition. That, of course, will be alive as much as people can sing it and can chant it within the church.
And I have one other question, if I may, before I allow others to pose their own questions. It has three elements, actually, this question. Various things that occurred to me when I heard your last two examples. In other words, we had those men sitting around the table and singing in beautiful triadic harmony in a secular environment, singing this love song, the two suns, the two moons, and so on, which was really so impressive. But one thing that struck me, by the way, was that there were two beautiful ladies who were seated there, but they were not doing anything and they were not singing. So it occurred to me, could it be that just as in church we could not see women singing in your last example, even though the words were composed by a woman, by Saint Cassia, is it not acceptable for the women to take part in those things? Although in the Sicilian Albanian tradition, obviously some of the singers were women, both the elderly lady and the younger woman. So this was one thing that occurred to me. And the other thing that occurred to me is, of course, we heard this very beautiful performance conducted by Stathis in the church, harmonized, and I immediately thought of the Constantinople, the ecumenical patriarchs encyclical of the 19th century, in fact more than one encyclical, forbidding the use of harmony in the church as being something that is foreign and causes pleasure of a secular nature and is not really something that is desirable and acceptable, something that was found distressing. So does this objection not exist in the case of this particular tradition? And then the third thing was, it occurred to me, could it be that maybe there is no objection because this is actually also traditional, this harmonization, because your last two examples, those men who had their wine and around the table they were spontaneously improvising harmonies beautifully, it didn't sound so different from the artistic harmonization that was done by that composer. There was a lot in common between that traditional improvisatory and possibly, as far as I know, quite ancient practice, and the slightly more cultivated but otherwise not very different and idiomatically rather similar sounding performance of the piece, to the words by Cassia. Although I think we have the music by Cassia, by Cassiani herself as well, don't we? Her own melodies. So what are your thoughts on these matters, which are just my reactions when I heard these rather remarkable and highly enjoyable examples?
I will try to answer very shortly. Thank you very much for your interesting questions. The first one is about the relationship between gender and music. And it's something that in ethnomusicology was studied at least from the 1980s. It's not a very recent topic, but it's still an important topic. I can say something probably. After the PhD, I was preparing a Marie Curie application, and I prepared a Marie Curie application on this repertoire from Ionian Islands. And I didn't get Marie Curie, unfortunately, for some scores, but one of the comments, I was very astonished by one of the comments that they told me that I had probably to have a look at the gender issue, because these repertoires were exclusively sung and chanted by men. I mean, they suggested me to have a look at this topic and at this issue, and to enlarge probably the analysis on this in this direction. And it's something, of course, I had to take care of when I'm going to write. I will write this part of the analysis. To answer your question, yes, most of the areches are male repertoire. But I can assure you that there are also some example of female multi-part singing in the Ionian Islands, although it's not, they are not so so famous, because most of the cantatas and areches are basically sung by men. And this is something that probably can come out from the ecclesiastical chant tradition, because choir traditionally in Greece, especially, always have always been constituted by men. Now you can find several cases of women singing in the choir, even conducting choirs in Greece. But it's something recent. I'm not an expert on this area, but probably something that happened in the last 20 years. I don't know if Christian or Gigi have more information about this, but it's not something historical. It's something recent. And about the objection from the patriarchate, ecumenical patriarchate, I am sure that nowadays there is an official objection. I mean, people can sing in a polyphonic setting in Kefalonia, in Zakintos, and in Corfu. Bartholomeus, the Patriarch of Constantinople, visited the Ionian Islands, and he appreciated the local, it's a regional idiom, it's a musical idiom of these islands. But of course, historically, we find, and Christian can tell more about this, in the history, we find objections from the ecumenical patriarchate about the use of polyphonic. For example, in Vienna, maybe I was talking with you, Haig, about this example, that there was an objection about the Orthodox Church in Vienna in the 19th century. Yes. Where there was an example of polyphonic tradition of the Byzantine hymnography and liturgical chant. So things nowadays are different, fortunately. So there is an open way. Of course, there are still stereotypes and people looking at this tradition from time to time and saying, okay, this is not Byzantine chant. This is European chant. This is not, I mean, there is this idea, this prejudice sometimes you can find amongst singers and chanters, but I'm not saying this officially. I mean, it's something that you can find. If you talk with cantors, you can find this kind of things. And okay, I can read that Christian Rosgott wrote that he learned that Maria Alexandru is engaged in a renaissance of women's psaltiki. I like this news. Very nice. Yeah, very good news indeed. And
it's not something completely new. It is a renaissance because, of course, Cassiani probably sang herself, but of course, I imagine in women's convents.
Yes, yes. I mean, I'm not excluding the fact that yes, and Christian is also adding a very important piece of information that there are examples of multi-part singing in Byzantine notation from 14th and 15th centuries. Wow. Yes, it's something I should also include in the analysis of my current thesis. It's something I didn't yet examined in depth, and of course I didn't want to add so many information, pieces of information on the paleographic or manuscripts oriented, manuscript-wise tradition, because we didn't have time to look at manuscripts and to analyze notation tonight. It was just a discussion, let's say, on these topics. And to answer the very last question, that was actually about the fact that you noticed, Haig, that people sitting at the table were sort of well informed on how to sing, like having practiced it for years. So I think that this is a result of musical practice, musical transmission that has been kept for centuries and for years. We have sometimes we look at the high cultural music and then the low cultural music. There's no such distinction in real life. People sitting at the table and using this improvised polyphonic settings are as much as artists, let's say, and professional, so to speak, as people singing in the church. And so sometimes, most of the times, you find the very same people singing in the church and then at the table. The soloist of the Arekies that you heard, I didn't have time to show also an ecclesiastical chant tradition example from Zakintos, but Panayotis Marinos, the soloist that started the Arekia, is a psaltist. He's a hieropsaltist, so it's a cantor in the church of Agios Dionysos in Zakintos. So people chanting in the church, after when they gather, they sing together, and they are well practiced, well prepared, let's say, to sing both the ecclesiastical and the secular chant tradition.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this comprehensive response. We still have a few moments, so I should like to open the floor. We can, I think, deal with maybe a couple of short questions briefly. Is there anyone who would like to ask something?
I have a question.
Tom, please.
It should be short, hopefully short. In the interview you did with the woman in Italian, she was talking about learning these things strictly through oral tradition, and I assume that was mostly rote. She said she read neither Greek nor Albanian. Do you have a perception of a balance between how people learn in the oral tradition and what has been gathered in actual written music? Is this being passed down, or is there a possibility of it being passed down through the written tradition as the oral tradition seems to grow less?
I'm not sure if I understood the question. It's about the presence both of oral and written testimonies. Okay, so the interference amongst the
or the balance, the balance in what has been preserved through written documents and through the oral tradition, and if the oral tradition is gradually about to disappear, will the written tradition take more of its place?
Yes, I will also reply after to Professor Gigi Garofalo questions afterwards. Yes, the one piece of information I missed to say is that we have the very first dated copy of musical transcriptions in 1989. It's 11 pages manuscript in staff notation that we found, that was found in Palazzo Adriano, that is one of the 5 villages, transcribed by a musician, Parisio Chiovu is the name, but probably the name was another one. I don't know if there are news about this. I will ask Gigi if we know something more about Parisio Chiovo. But the thing is that since we started finding musical transcriptions in staff notation and made by priests, because, for example, we have musical transcription of this chant tradition in 1910. And then in 1930s, we have a volume by Father Lorenzo Tardo with some examples of this. Transcriptions, and then we have in 1950s Father Bartolomeo di Salvo, who started collecting musical transcriptions, and then at the end, after 60 years, we have this book with musical transcriptions of the chant tradition. The thing is that lay people most of the time don't know how to read music. So they are not scholarized. I don't know if scholarized is an English term, like scolarizzati in Italian would say. I mean, they didn't know how to read music. They still don't know, most of them, they don't know how to read music. And when they sing, they chant during the services, they use very small pages, I mean, like very short books with the text, with the lyrics of the liturgy, transliterated from Greek alphabet into the Italian alphabet. So the thing is that most of them have learned the, yes, see you, Christian, thank you very much for being with us. So we have basically the presence of transcriptions, in musical transcriptions, that was kept in archives or in private archives and still have to be studied. Professor Gigi Garofalo knows very well about it, because we have another very important collection made by another Papas Matteo Chambra, another priest from Contessa Entellina, one of these 5 villages. So we still need to study these musical transcriptions, but still they are not accessible to people, because we don't have, apart from this and another one from Mezzo Iuso that was published by Gigi Garofalo, they are not available to people. They cannot buy a book and read it during the liturgies. They still learn, I mean, the chants, liturgical chants, by heart. About the recordings, historical recordings, we have...
Sorry to interrupt. That is a marvelous thing, isn't it? Because the last thing you want is for the younger people to buy those books and to sight read those things, to learn to read music, no longer to memorize them, no longer to allow the things to penetrate their very bones and bodies and minds and souls, and just come to the church and sight read the music by reading whatever they see on the printed page. And if the oral tradition were to disappear, and if we are left with only the transcriptions, even though those transcriptions are excellent and faithful transcriptions, but it is so difficult to reconstruct the style of the performance and the way in which it is paced, if we were have to work it out from the printed page, if the tradition has disappeared. So the relationship between the written transcriptions and the oral tradition can be a little even antagonistic, maybe. But what I think some of us are wondering is, apart from those transcriptions in staff notation, these communities never used neumes, as in the middle period Byzantine neumes or the Chrysantine neumes. So they were surrounded by or Gregorian neumes in Italy, so they had neighbors who were using some sort of notation in medieval times or late medieval times, but they themselves relied exclusively on memory.
They usually, and when I say they, I'm talking about the congregation and the choir, lady and man singing in the choir. They don't know how to read the psaltiki, I mean the psaltic pneumatic notation of the modern church, Greek church. But priests from time to time, they could read this modern pneumatic notation, because sometimes they include some Byzantine modern chant into the liturgy. It's the case of the Idou Onymphos Erkete from the Holy Week. It's a chant sung during the Holy Week. It's about Christ as a groom coming into the church. It's I don't know now the exact translation, but it's Ecco lo sposo viene. It's in Italian. By the way, the fact is that in that very case, since they want also to attach these traditions from time to time to a Greek idea of transmission, they also include sometimes the psaltic, the psaltic art, but it's not a custom. It's something very, especially in Sicily, very unusual. In Calabria, they use psaltic art much more, according to what I know, as far as I know. And so they don't know very much how to read. Some priests probably they have studied in other seminaries, or they have traveled to Greece, or they wanted to know how to read pneumatic notation. For example, is the case of Papas Sotir Ferrara of blessed memory. He knew how also the Greek tradition, so from time to time he transcribed. We have some exercises of transcriptions of the pneumatic notation of modern chant tradition, let's say, but they don't use it regularly. So lay people, to answer your question, Haig, lay people use, they know the tradition, and when there is an interpolation and an influence, let's say, from the modern Greek chant tradition, it's still learned by heart.
Right.
From lay people.
Thank you.
I would like to answer to Professor Gigi Garofalo a question.
We have 1 or 2 minutes left now.
If I can.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a very short answer. Arekia, it's according to a Greek professor, comes from the Venetian dialect expression aurecchio, that is also Italian aurecchio, because, you know, Ionian Islands have been under the Venetian rule for so many centuries. So they have absorbed for sure Italian music, Italian culture, Italian language. So the expression arecchia comes most probably from the Italian expression aurecchio, meaning something chanted, performed by heart, aurecchio, like not based on written music, but on the oral experience of music.
And please remind us,
I hope I answered your question, Gigi.
Please remind us, Giuseppe, who uses this term, arecchia?
Arecchia, yes. Arecchia is the repertoire from Zakintos that we listened when people were sitting at the taverna. It was not the last example, the previous one. So arecchia, arecchies, is the plural, is the name for this repertoire from Zakintos. Then we have ariettes from aria, arietta, and cantades. These are all repertoires that you can find in the Ionian Islands, but it wasn't a lecture on the Ionian tradition. So I missed some details for this reason.
Well, inevitably, in this brief period of time, you still have covered an admirable expanse of fascinating musical terrain. Allow me, on behalf of us all, to express our profound gratitude to you for this very illuminating and highly enjoyable session, Giuseppe, and our very best wishes for your future endeavors. I hope that we may be able to meet like this again at some point in the future and hear about your latest findings. So thank you so very much to Dr. Giuseppe Sanfratello. Let us virtually applaud to express our appreciation. Thank you very much indeed to our distinguished and enthusiastic audience. This was a very different presentation in that it covered some very unusual ground that will not have been known, I dare say, to many of our members. I am thinking of the Charles University Orchestra and Chorus, and one which it was really extremely enjoyable to be exposed to. And with the YouTube links that you gave us and some of the terminology that we became acquainted with, I think people will be able to search things on the internet and on YouTube and perhaps listen more fully to some of those rather beautiful excerpts. So thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Just a reminder that 1 week from now, on the 31st of March, we have a session on Bruckner's symphonies, also music that is primeval in its power and somehow very fundamental, and also music that many people find very spiritually, that touches them on a spiritual dimension, even in the case of the symphonies that are secular works. Of course, he wrote masses, motets, Te Deum, and so on and so forth. And the week after, on the 7th of April, we shall have another very interesting and charismatic musicologist and performer such as Giuseppe, namely the Australian musicologist and violinist of Czech heritage, Sigrid Harris. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me for the forthcoming sessions, including those two. Once again, our profound thanks to Giuseppe for a superb presentation, and my very best wishes to you all.
Thank you.
Have a safe and enjoyable week until we meet again. A very good night to you.
Thank you very much. See you. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.